Sorry, we're getting started a little bit late here. I find myself having a really hard time being on time in the summer. I'm not really sure why. This is the time and place for the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1 board meeting of July 19th, 2022. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Bajent, Clegg,
Here.
Woodings,
Here.
2 present, 1 absent.
All right. The next thing on the agenda is approval of the minutes.
Chair, I move approval of the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1 minutes of the regular meeting of June 21st, 2022.
Second, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right, next up on the agenda, we have item 3-1, recovery of foregone property taxes, public hearing. I'm going to turn it over to David.
All right. Well, Madam Chair, members of the board, it's good to see all of you again. My name is David Hasagawa, and I am the administrator for the CID district. Today, the district will hold 2 public hearings. The first hearing is regarding a resolution that would recover $176 of foregone property taxes to be used for the maintenance and operations of the district. The second public hearing is to consider the fiscal year 2023 budget. Please note that the resolution approving the 2023 budget does not address any of the projects that the developer has submitted for reimbursement. Those projects will be reviewed at a future meeting. So that is the agenda. And so I just wanted to make a couple of remarks before we start that first public hearing for the recovery of foregone property taxes. The first is I wanted to call your attention to the amount. It is just $176 in this year. And the district has $3,209 that is available to it in foregone property taxes. And $176 of that is eligible to be recovered for the fiscal 2023 budget. As required by Idaho code, a public hearing needs to be held prior to the board taking any action, any decision on recovering that property tax. This foregone property tax would be used to help pay for additional legal expenses that the district has incurred both last fiscal year, incurring this fiscal year, and in upcoming years. Those were my remarks for the first public hearing. Madam Chair, any questions before we start the hearing?
Are there any questions for David?
Madam Chairman, no, but I'd like to make just a couple of comments if I could. We've received a lot of contact from taxpayers in the district about putting off this hearing. I guess, first of all, for those of you who did not receive an email back, we have to hold this hearing in time to certify a tax document with the Secretary of State. If we miss that deadline, it would cause grievous damage, frankly, to the district going forward, because we would not be able to keep up with the payments the debt service that we already owe. The other part of it that for me is really important to note is that this hearing, while required by law, is one that was, as required by law, is one that was duly noted. I know that some people feel like they didn't have enough notice. There was more notice than is required under Idaho statute, and as such feel confident that we need to go forward today with these hearings.
Thank you for those comments. And I just want to echo what Board Member Clegg has said. We held our budget workshop, which is a process that we typically go through here at the city for each budget. And the budget workshop for the Harris Ranch CID was actually the prior week to the city's budget workshop. The city's budget workshop is also today. So there was actually an extra week from what the city with a much larger budget the time in between that workshop and the public hearing. So I appreciate everyone who took the time to reach out to us. Your feedback has been received, and it's much appreciated. This item is only the foregone property taxes. And I know that I wasn't familiar with the concept of foregone for a long time, until I came to the city. And I think I was educated by Councilmember Clegg on what foregone taxes were, because most jurisdictions have them. The reason that we decided to take some of these foregone taxes is because we're having an increase to our administrative costs for the district. And this will help us in this year and in out years recover some of those taxes so that we can pay those administrative costs that have been on the rise. So I appreciate that presentation, David. Do we have a sign-in sheet?
There's one at the podium.
Oh, there's one at the podium. There's nothing on there. All right. Well, I will go ahead and let's open the public hearing for the foregone property taxes. Is there anyone here to testify on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on the foregone property taxes, and a motion is in order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recognizing that the bulk
Madam
of this
Chair.
budget is much.
Oh, I
higher.
apologize.
Oops,
I forgot that there are people
we
online.
have someone online. Okay.
Is there anyone online who wishes to testify on the foregone property taxes portion of this public hearing?
There are 7 attendees, so we just ask that they raise their hand if they would like to speak on the item.
All right, if you're online and you would like to speak on the foregone property taxes portion of the public hearing, please raise your hand on Zoom. All right, I'm assuming everyone's here for the next portion of our public hearing. So let's go ahead and officially close the public hearing. Thank you, Rob. And a motion's in order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recognizing that this is a very small amount, but it offers an opportunity to begin a process of taking this over a series of years so that we can, in fact, help pay some of the administrative expenses. I move that we approve HR CID 7-2022, a resolution to recover foregone property taxes for the fiscal year 2023 budget in the amount of $176 and providing an effective date.
Second, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right, now we'll move on to the second public hearing item, which is the FY23 operating budget. David?
All right, well, Madam Chair, this budget is substantially the same as the budget that was presented at the June 21st workshop. And this hearing, as Board Member Clegg noticed, observed was noticed on July 8th throughout the district at each of the postal pavilions, and was additionally noticed on July 11th in the Idaho Statesman. As you also noted, Madam Chair, we have received about a little over 20 responses from residents regarding this hearing. And so I wanted to address 2 points that were brought up regarding property taxes. The first is that in the budget workshop, I had mentioned that the average homeowner would see an increase in their property taxes of about 9%. And part of the challenge of that is when you use the term average. The district has had a number of smaller homes that fall below the average that were constructed. And so that lowers the average of within the district of the market value. And so I did want to note that for some residents, they will see property tax increases somewhere in between 35 to 41%. And so I thought that was pertinent to observe, as some residents have noted that the overall property taxes would be increasing by about 50%. And the second item that I wanted to note is that no one should see a full 50% increase. Part of the increase in the market value from last year to this year was that we have new construction, and we also have the occupancy rules that are added. And so that accounts for about 25% of the increase. So that's why some homeowners will see increases between 35 and 41%, not that full 50%. The last item that I wanted to address is that in the workshop, Board Member Clegg had asked that I discuss the impact that would come from potentially reducing the levy. In the workshop, I had proposed a levy alternative of taking the taxable value and reducing it by about 90%. And so Board Member Clegg had asked, well, what does that mean for the district if we do that? One of the things that's important to understand is that from when a community infrastructure project is completed, from that date until the district actually purchases that project, interest starts to accrue to the developer. And so when projects are not purchased through bond proceeds, then that interest continues to build. And so lowering the levy means less bond proceeds can be used, which consequently means that there is more interest that accrues. And so I looked at 3 scenarios, which are up on the screen. One, scenario A, it considers the average growth over the last 8 years of the district. And then what scenario B is the low point, assuming low growth from here on out. And scenario C assumes high growth. And so in the average case, the additional interest, if we were to just come in at that 90%, would be about $369,000 additional dollars that would be used for interest rather than for community infrastructure. So I know that's a little bit of I gave a lot of information. So Madam Chair, I'll be happy to stand for any questions clarifying that.
Yeah, David, can you just give us a couple of reminders? How do we decide how are we as a board charged by state statute with deciding which projects are eligible for reimbursement, and how is the interest rate determined on what we then reimburse to the developer?
Yeah. So Madam Chair, with regards to the projects that are eligible, there's 2 governing forces that are authorities. The first is Idaho State Code under Title 50, Chapter 31. And so within there, the community infrastructure is defined. And so any projects that are submitted for purchase must meet those definitions of community infrastructure. The second governing authority or document is a development agreement that's been signed between the district, the city of Boise, and the Harris Family Limited Partnership. And that document contains additional, more granular details on what is eligible for purchase. And so when a project is submitted by the developer for purchase, city staff, as well as external counsel, review those documents to confirm that they are eligible, and then make a recommendation to the board as to whether or not those projects should be accepted in whole or in part. And so then the board makes that final determination of whether a project is eligible for purchase by the district. So that's an answer to your first question. I'll get to your second, but to see if there's any other clarifying questions.
Well, I do have some questions, but why don't you answer Chair's second question first?
Okay. So the second question was, how is that interest rate determined? And that rate is set within the development agreement. And that rate of interest accrual is the prime rate plus 2%, which currently stands, that prime plus 2% is 6.75% as of a few weeks ago.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair. So David, in your scenarios here, that interest accrual is 1 year's worth of interest, is that correct?
So Madam Chair, Board Member Clegg, that would be actually over the whole
That's
length.
over the whole life of it.
Yeah.
So if we reduce the assessment to 90% this year over the life of the bond, or over the life of the district, it could cost up to $406,000 in interest rather than infrastructure being paid for with those proceeds.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, Board Member Clegg, I've made a number of assumptions. One is that interest rate itself doesn't change, which it's likely to go up. And then if we have a recession, the Fed could cut rates. So I just made the assumption that it does not change from what it is today. The other thing is that a recession could cause there to be less growth within the district, or we could have substantially more. So there's quite a few variables. And so I've had to make some assumptions in order to come up with that. So I would consider that, you've got a range there of what it could be.
Thank you. Bottom line, though, if these projects aren't reimbursed this year, they'll be reimbursed at a later date. And if we go far enough along that more of the projects are eaten up by interest or costs continue to rise, ultimately it will result in less of the infrastructure that's proposed in the development agreement being built. Is that fair to say?
Yes, Madam Chair, Board Member Clegg, that is correct. And just, I didn't put it up there, but for this year alone, if we were to take 90%, it would be about 161,000 is the impact for just this 1 year.
Okay, thank you. Second question, you noted that some folks' taxes could go up 35 to 40%. What portion of that is the CID versus the rest of the taxes, including school district, county, and city?
Yeah, so Madam Chair, Board Member Clegg, that I was only looking at the CID itself. So that's
So the taxes of the CID could go up that much, but total tax burden on the property owner, do we know that?
So the total tax burden, what we're actually seeing is that as Eric Villamoria for the city has presented, the actual levy rate for the rest of the city has actually been going down. And so that has to do with the fact that, relatively speaking, a budget is fixed when it comes to most governmental agencies like a city. And so as the value of a home increases, but the budget stays relatively the same, that proportion decreases. However, with the district is taxes on an incremental basis. And so a district is sometimes called an incremental taxing district. And so what that means is the levy rate itself is fixed. And so what you'll see is that levy will remain fixed. And so it will become a larger and larger portion of the taxes that a homeowner will pay relative to the other. That is, if growth itself, under the way the mechanism hopefully works, is that you're going to have sufficient construction that is what's going to be driving the taxable value of the district, as opposed to appreciation in home values. However, what we've seen recently, both for the district as well as for the city itself, is that home values are what is driving the change rather than new construction.
Thank you. Follow up on that. As home values moderate, which it looks like they're beginning to, and hopefully we don't have a recession like we did in 2008. As that begins to happen, the levy rate will either stabilize or go back up on the whole at the city level, and the proportion of the CID of that would decrease if that were to happen. I mean, we've 10 years ago when this started, it was the other way around. Now it's this way, the teeter-totter's this way. My guess is it's going to land somewhere in the middle, but right now, certainly understand that the proportion of the taxes that are CID related compared to the others have increased, noting that early on in the life of the CID, those proportion of taxes were actually quite low. Am I right in that analysis?
Yeah, so Madam Chair, Board Member Clegg, holding other things constant, yes, that would be the case. A big question mark in my mind would be how much new development there is during a recession, or just in any event, as you have more construction, and depending on the volume of that, that also can help to alleviate the burden to individual homeowners.
Thank you. Final question, and I don't know if you're going to go into more detail on the budget, and if you're going to, that's fine, but I'll ask this question anyway. Much has been made of the total revenue and total expenses shown here, noting that almost $7 million of that is carryover because we did not let bonds last year. Is that so? The budget, although it looks very large, is really written this way to ensure that there's room to make whatever decision is necessary about last year's approved projects and reimbursing for those.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, Board Member Clegg, so in line 7 on the budget, you can see that there's, so line 7 and then line 25. So on the revenue side and then on the expense side, there's $5 million in contingency in the event that the general obligation bond for last year's budget, or for this specific, I'm sorry, for this year's budget, fiscal 2022, is not issued, but is instead issued in fiscal 2023. However, I will note that the lines that concern most folks are summarized in line number 5, which is the overall impact. And then bonds work on a leveraged basis based on the revenues that are coming in. But yes, the overall number of 21 million is greatly affected by the fact that we have a lot of unknowns with the district in terms of the timing of the issuance of bonds.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then I have one more question, David. So we have a district with agreements made through the development agreement and through state statute. And it's currently approved to use up to 50 million in general obligation bonds to pay for the projects that have this criteria for approval. Where are we right now on letting those bonds, and where are we in the progress toward that 50 million?
One second while I pull that up. It should be about 15 million or so has been issued so far. Yeah. Bill here knows it very well. So about 15 million has been issued so far. Another about 5 million has been approved. And so that puts us to about 20 million, with about 30 or so million available for issuance.
Okay, great.
In the future.
Excellent, thank you. And so that's kind of when the letting of bonds would end, is when that 50 million has been exhausted by the board based on the development agreement projects and the projects that are allowed by state statute. Is that correct? Yeah, so Madam Chair, there would be a couple of things. The bond authorization is for 50 million. It also expires ultimately in 2050. Okay. So that's the other thing, is if it were not all used during that time, then it would also expire. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Madam Chair, one last question, just a reminder for myself on this. I'm pretty sure I'm correct. The higher the levy today, the more likely, the sooner the levy itself altogether will expire. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Madam Chair, Board Member Clegg, if we were to expedite based on either availability of funds as the district grows, if we were to issue quickly, then yes, the purpose of the district would then shift to simply paying down those bonds as opposed to issuing new bonds. And I also realized I had the year wrong. I said 2050. It should be 2040.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Do you have anything else for us, David?
Madam Chair, that's it.
All right, then we are going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Let's start with folks online. If you are online and you would like to testify, please raise your hand on Zoom and we will unmute you and take your testimony. Each person has 3 minutes to testify. And I just ask that everyone keep it on topic, keep it respectful and respectful towards everyone in the room and each other. So do we have anyone online?
Madam Chair, I have no raised hands.
All right. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to testify? Sir, go ahead and approach the podium. Please just state your name and your address for the record.
Thank you. My name's Oliver Thompson. My address is 4458 East Park Center Boulevard. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this board today. I would like to try to give some real life, real world numbers that relate to me specifically as we talk about property taxes increases. It's my own anecdotal data, but it may serve to get us out of this theoretical conversation and into a bit more concrete. So I purchased my home in 2020 for approximately $400,000. It's a 1,900 square foot home. And today, a similar model is going for over $680,000. That's a huge increase. I have one comment, and I'm trying to make this as respectful as possible. I don't understand all of the ins and outs here, but I know we're talking about interest accrued and that which is owed to the developer and the board's desire to protect the developer from undue interest. I think the developer is making a lot of money in this development based on the value of the homes that they are currently selling. And I just, in my opinion, I think they're making plenty of money. We shouldn't be so concerned about protecting their interests and covering their risk. I've also been told that the improvements that we're talking about as a result of these bonds are meant to increase the value of the homes in this neighborhood. And so things like meridians on the road or bypasses for warm springs, et cetera, are meant to increase the value of the homes. I have also some anecdotal data that because of these future assessments and levies, there are many real estate agents who are pointing potential buyers away from this neighborhood because of the risk and because of the unknown cost to the individual homeowners. So in my opinion, that's going to overall decrease the potential value of the homes in my neighborhood. As an example, my property taxes in the last year have gone up $270 a month. And that is well over a 50% increase in what I was paying. And I think that's it. Thank you for the opportunity to address this board.
Wonderful.
Madam
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
Oliver, if I, just maybe a clarifying statement, and if you have a comment, you're certainly welcome. My concern about the interest payments to the developer is not to protect the developer, it's to protect you, the homeowner. The more those interest payments accrue, the more you as a homeowner are going to be required to pay interest rather than paying for infrastructure. And so I'm trying to figure out what is the balance here so that money that is already agreed upon in the development agreement that, you know, is long signed, it's a signed contract, goes to actual infrastructure improvements, which it's my understanding are meant to improve your quality of life. And so I guess as a board member, that's my concern that I'm trying to address.
Thank you. And I would just, my only response to that is the homeowners did not have a lot of say in what those improvements were going to be and the costs associated with it. So I would like to have the opportunity to review what future improvements are still on record and have the opportunity to voice my opinion about the prioritization of those improvements.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm a school district taxpayer and the bond passed and I don't get to go back and get seconds at it. It's kind of the fact of life of the way we run bonds in this state, and certainly understand your concerns. So thank you for voicing them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Go ahead and approach the podium. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Bill Doyle. Is this on? Can you hear me?
I can't. You might need to push the button. No.
Better?
What's going on with our
Is it
microphone?
on?
Oh, I think it's on now.
There should be a
Testing,
green light.
testing.
Oh, now I can hear you, Bill.
Can you hear me? Okay. Let's see. Address is 3026 South Brookridge in Harris Ranch in Boise. I'll try to keep my comments relatively brief and certainly within the 3 minutes. At first point I would like to make is that particularly board member Clegg have expressed concerns about the accrual of additional interest to the extent that deferral, that project reimbursements to the developer are deferred into the future. You, I think, have a fundamental understanding of the nature of the development agreement and the obligation to the developer. The original projections prepared back in 2010 by the developer with respect to the disbursement of the $50 million authorized bond amount showed no payments, $0 being paid to the developer for accrued interest, even though the projected reimbursements would be made over a period of 30 years between 2010 and 2040. There is no obligation to pay the accrued interest to the extent that the $50 million authorized bond amount expires and accrued interest has been paid, the obligation disappears. So there is $50 million of supposed bond approval. What the developer spends that money on is entirely up to the developer. And in fact, what you failed to note, in addition, is that the reimbursements are not being applied to pay or reimburse for community infrastructure and improvements that benefit homeowners. Primarily, they're being applied to compensate the developer for the supposed value of land underneath streets and stormwater ponds and drainage ditches, which every other developer in the state of Idaho has to pay for itself and doesn't get reimbursed. Board Member Clegg, you also, on many occasions, including today, have alluded to the bond election and to school district bond elections. There is a profound fundamental difference between a school district bond election in which all the residents of the school district, of which there are thousands or tens of thousands, get to vote, and subsequent homeowners in the same pre-existing homes step into the shoes of those prior voters. And the supposed election that was held with respect to the CID. That election, which we are challenging in court, there was one, at most one, qualified approving vote. And that approving vote was by a ranch hand employed by
Mr. Doyle,
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask you to keep the top
Right.
and not pending litigation.
I'm just responding to comments made by one of the members
That's
of the
fair.
board.
Thank you.
So that election was had a single approving vote. Not a single homeowner in Harris Ranch was entitled to vote.
Mr. Doyle, please
So the
keep it to
most-
this year's budget.
So what I suggest, the most equitable thing to do, taking into account the interests of the developer and being reimbursed pursuant to the development agreement, and the interests of homeowners
Time.
in not having their taxes imposed by the CID go up 50% in 1 year or 78% in 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
is
Your
to
time is
limit-
up.
Pardon me?
Your time is up.
Okay, is to limit the increase in the CID's budget to the same limitation that applies to the city, and that is a 3% annual limitation and back into the amount of debt and the amount of property taxes that you would impose as a result.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Is there anyone else in the room who wishes to testify? Yes, sir. Please come on up.
Hi, my name is Bill Shepard. I live at 2343 South Trapper Place up in Harris North. And my question is fairly simple and probably best addressed by Mr. Hasegawa. I think I understood you to say that the question today is about the budget, approving this budget, and that the projects would be reviewed later to determine if they are allowable and allocable to the CID. Is that correct?
So yes, Madam Chair and Bill, yes, that's correct.
Okay, that was my question. So
Thank
there
you.
will be a chance later for those questions to come up and possibly have homeowners at least aware of and provide input.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, that's a great question. That will be a decision of the board. This public hearing is by state statute the only public hearing that we have. However, I always welcome and invite homeowners to provide comment, which I will submit to the board when those decisions are made. So the projects themselves will be available on the website, and residents will have the opportunity to review those and provide any comment that they would like to the board as part of their decision when the board is actually making those decisions.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Yes, sir. Come on up.
My name is Alan Hogan, and I live at 6132 East Barber. Two questions or clarifications for David. Could you expand on growth? And you said the district might change in size. Thank you.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, in terms of growth, at this point, I am only projecting what growth has been so far. And so I'm using a rear-looking approach to project those in terms of the actual growth and construction and how much is remaining to be built out, both in terms of residential and then commercial. I would actually defer that question to the developer.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So follow up, David, you're projecting growth based on the past, which has primarily been single family home growth, and you're not including the potential value of the commercial and the multifamily that is in the plan and is currently being planned and built, which could potentially come in at a higher rate than 100 single family homes a year versus 900 multifamily. Am I correct?
Yeah,
For
so
instance.
yeah, Madam Chair, Board Member Clegg, that's correct that there is a amount of commercial that could be built in that, again, I'm just using averages to approach that. One of the goals of the district is to be able to do a better job. And so actually City Council this evening will consider a staff increase that will help assist the district in providing more analysis when it comes to projecting growth.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Is there anyone online who has changed their mind and wishes to testify? Please raise your hand.
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised.
Okay. Then hearing nobody else wishing to testify, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And what is the direction of the board?
Madam Chair, none of us like what has happened to our property taxes over the last few years. My own have more than doubled in a 4-year time without a CID. Doesn't make me happy, but I also recognize that I live in a pretty wonderful place that has a pretty high quality of life, and those taxes pay for that. Having said that, our tax system needs fixed. And so the question before us today is whether we limit the amount of taxes we collect for this particular thing, assuming that by doing so, we'll provide some fix, when in fact the real fix has to be addressed at the legislature. And in fact, ironically, reducing the risk ourselves might reduce the pressure on the legislature to come up with a real fix. So for me, this is a real conundrum, quite frankly. We have a district that has an approved development agreement that has a first of its kind approved specific area plan that identifies the things that make this development different from other developments. And collectively, those things have in fact proven out to create a place that is higher value on average than many of the other places in the valley. So here we are. And it seems to me that as painful as it sounds, and certainly as maddening as it might be, that the appropriate action is to go ahead and stay with the plan as it was originally conceived and approve the budget as it's proposed based on those plans over time. Reducing a little bit will save a little bit, but it really will be a little bit, as we've seen with our own bigger property tax increases or percentage property tax increases at the city. Playing at the margins saves a little bit per house, but it costs more in interest. It means less infrastructure. It has all of these downstream effects that, from my perspective, I have a hard time saying, yes, this makes sense to do it this way, because this the impact will be such a positive thing that it will offset the negatives that it creates. I have a hard time seeing that with this. It doesn't mean I think that this is easy or that what's happened with our property taxes in this state are the right thing. The legislature can fix this, and they've refused to. And in doing so, they put all of us in a horrible situation. And so with trepidation, to be certain, because of all of that, I move approval of our Harris Ranch CID 8/2022, a resolution approving the fiscal year 2023 operating budget for the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District, number 1, and providing an effective date.
And I'm going to go ahead and second that just for the sake of discussion. I am so much in the same boat as you in seeing the trade-offs between approving the full budget and approving some slightly limited budget and adjusting the levy rate. And I think that what we're really talking about here is the levy rate. Because properties in this area are so sought after, as you noted, Oliver, property values have increased, I think, in a way that none of us envisioned. And that levy rate, meanwhile, is staying the same. And what that means is, yes, things get paid off more quickly, but at what cost to the current homeowners? We were presented with several scenarios in our budget workshop memo that Mr. Hasegawa sent us. And one of those scenarios had kind of built in a 10% market decline projection. And we do have a lot of unknowns right now. We have an economy that's, up and it's down and no one's really sure what's going on. But what that 10% market decline does, I think, is recognize where we are economically at this moment. And also it keeps the actual revenue to the district the same as what we proposed or what we approved for this current fiscal year at 5.3 million. So I think that it feels to me that that's a really good compromise. It doesn't allow the full, 8 million that we were looking at for proceeds, but it does kind of keep that flat. And it reduces the levy rate a little bit for homeowners, which I think makes sense given the way that properties have increased over just the past couple of years. I think that this was just something that none of us really saw coming. And I don't think that lowering the levy rate, because we can adjust the levy rate, has long-term implications. If property values decline, we can adjust the levy rate back up and kind of, oh, I'm not sure what that is. We have a passwords thing up here. I think that it kind of hits the sweet spot. So for the sake of discussion, now that I've thrown that out there, what are your thoughts, Member Clegg?
Well, and for those of you who don't know, Member Bajent just simply couldn't be here today. He's got a work assignment that is ongoing and hasn't allowed him to participate. So it really is up to the two of us, and we need to find some resolution so that we can go forward. So here, I guess what I was trying to say, however inartfully, is that yes, that full levy at about 200,000 versus the less than full levy at 1.9 does have a small impact per homeowner. And my question is whether that small impact per homeowner is worthy of the downstream pain that it will cause if we don't collect it this year. On the other hand, it's not very much in this 1 year, and allowing for some adjustment in this 1 year while, the one thing I would say to all of you, the legislature needs to hear about this. This is not anything we can fix. And I wish I could. I wish I had the power to fix this. I can't. Without the pressure from homeowners that you're giving to us, to them, they won't fix it. And so, part of what I'm trying to say is understand your angst. I think it's misplaced because we're not the ones who can ultimately fix this, and we aren't the ones who ultimately will be able to make it all better like it was 10 years ago when the proportions were so much different. So having said all that, I guess I would be willing for this 1 year to lower the levy rate as long as the motion indicates that this is a 1 year thing while we look at the long term.
I think that's fair, and I appreciate your willingness to compromise on that. I think that because of that economic uncertainty, because of that uncertainty with property values and the way that the market's cooling, I think it makes good sense. So
I guess with that, I would amend my motion to say that we will approve the resolution for fiscal year 2023 operating budget with the amendment that the levy rate will be reduced by 10% to meet 90% of the full approved rate. And in that case, the staff will have to return to us with the budget numbers. So my question is whether we can approve that today or whether we approve what we would like to see, and we have to see those numbers before we can approve it. David, I'll look to you to know if you have those numbers.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, Board Member Clegg, with regards to the levy rate, we definitely can reduce the amount of that. I don't have the numbers prepared to be able to show you at this time. I would note, just for the purposes of the motion itself, that when you say a 10% decline, it should be a 10% decline specific to the bond levy. The administrative levy itself should remain. There's effectively two levies, and so the administrative levy would need to remain the same, but the bond levy is the one that should be reduced, and definitely can return with those numbers.
Okay. I'll take one more shot at this. I move that we approve the resolution approving the fiscal year 2023 operating budget for the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1 with a 10% reduction in the levy rate for the bond proceeds, and the rest of the budget to remain as presented. And that 10% reduction is only for the 2023 year. And direct staff to bring back to us the revised budget numbers by next Tuesday for review. I think we can approve the budget as is. And do we have to review it before we can send it to the L2? Oh, you'll be gone. Yeah. Okay. So return it at the earliest possible date when we have a quorum of the board available.
Second. All right, with a motion and a second, clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay, so the revised budget numbers will be brought back to us along with an L2 that we will approve to transmit to the county at the same time. The budget is a resolution and the L2, I believe, is also a resolution. So be on the lookout for when that meeting will happen. We will not have an additional public hearing on that. This is the one and only budget public hearing we'll be conducting. And with that, our agenda is complete, and I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second, clerk.
Aye.
Clegg,
Oh, sorry. I guess all in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.